this John Roderick here. It's like, wait, what? Can I get out of here so that I'm not on the same frequency as you? Because when you talk, I could hear it from you, and
Huh?
Should I get out of here?
Yeah, I don't want to hear the echoing.
No, it's in my ear. You won't hear it. I will hear it.
Oh.
So just join?
Yeah, there you are. Hey guys, we are working to get started. We've had a couple of technical difficulties already, so as soon as I can get Jeffrey into the room here, we will get the show rolling. Oh, I mean, if they want to listen in with you out there, that's fine. Okay, good. We got Jeffrey. All right, good. We are going to give this about 1 more minute for people to load in, and I'm going to invite people to the show, and we're going to get rolling here. Share it out to the world. And I'm going to share it out to the Twitter. All right. Okay. All right. So we are getting ready to roll here. I'm going to turn off notifications. Always a fun thing during the show. All right. Okay, guys, I am so excited for tonight's show. It seems like there might be a little bit of a delay, so sometimes Fireside loves to act up. We'll see how that works out. I might have to change to my 5G if this continues, but we'll see how it goes. So just an introduction here. My name is Deanna, and you are in the Laughter After Trauma show. I appreciate each and every one of you showing up here tonight. We have a super special guest on the show tonight. So what I do each and every week as a speaker, educator, and coach is to bring light and lightness to the heavy topic of trauma. And I personally have experienced, and I say I am a thriver after intimate partner violence, but it led me to find the beauty and the laughter in healing. And I believe that all of us have the ability to self-heal. We all have what it takes inside of us to make that happen. And I do also believe that we've all experienced some level of trauma. And so it's good to hear the stories so that we know that we are not alone, that if I can, you can. And so with the Laughter After Trauma show here, we just highlight everyday people, and maybe Jeffrey might not be an everyday person. I don't know. I'm pretty impressed myself if you read his bio. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. But it's all about providing hope, awareness, connection, and community, and sharing the laughter after. So I'm going to give you guys a little intro and bio about Jeffrey, and then I'm going to pull him up to camera so we can get started with the interview. So the way I met Jeffrey is actually through another Fireside show where he was highlighting his book called The Emancipation of Evan Walls. This is his most recent book of 3 that he has authored. He is an award-winning author. He is an Emmy-winning TV director. He has spent 34 years in television career on NBC News, and he has won numerous awards in that arena. He's a contributor for HuffPost. He's also been published in the Washington Post, the Griot, many other publications. And he writes on the issues of race, social justice, and just the topic of how to write, right? And so the thing that I wanted to really have him on the show for this week is we're coming into a newly official Juneteenth holiday, right? So it's been blessed, it's been done, it's been looked at and celebrated, I think, over the years, but now it is completely official as a federal holiday. And this book, I thought, brought so much awareness to me on some levels, and I just thought it would be a good way to open up the conversation about generational trauma. And so without going any further into it, I'm going to bring Jeffrey up. We're going to talk. We're going to see where it comes from. And I'm freezing. Okay, let me, I'm getting feedback from the other room. Let me try this on if that works better. We'll see. Okay. So with that in mind, can you guys hear me? Can I get a clap if everybody can hear me and see me, just so that I know? Okay. All right, good. All right. Better? Okay. All right, good. So without any further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and unmute. Well, I'm going to invite you to video. You might have to unmute yourself, Jeffrey, after you accept the invite. There we go.
Hi, Indiana. How are you?
So hi, I am fabulous. So we had some technical difficulties. I guess they're continuing. I just want to say thanks so much again for doing this show with me. I did express that I feel like, wow, don't know how I got you to agree to this. You did it so readily. So there we go. But I really wanted to have you on the show because when I read your book, so I was on the show that was highlighted with Susan McBath, where she had a 4-part series on here. And I listened to 2 of them live and 2 of them in the replay, and we got to chat a little bit on there as well. But I went ahead and ordered the book from her because, of course, I wanted the signed copy. I think I ordered 2, actually. So I gave one away. But I read through this book so fast, I couldn't put it down. I think the book was amazing. And I think it highlighted some things that I don't think that I was aware of. And I try really hard to be as aware as possible as a person who hasn't lived through this can be. And I still learned a lot of things from your book. And my brother-in-law is African-American. He's married to my sister. And there's still so much that I don't know, and I'm just eager to know. So I'm so glad to be talking. So Jeffrey, let's start with you. Just tell us, where are you from? Where are you now? Do you have family? Just give us a little background about yourself.
I grew up on a farm in a little town called Smithfield, Virginia, which is the southeastern part of the state, the Tidewater part of the state, if you know Virginia. I lived on a street that is a long country road that is now recently named after my grandfather, Blount's Corner Road, because he had a store on the corner, and he had his little country store, and we had land and along that road. And so I grew up in a farming family, and I grew up with mom and dad who believed very strongly that their 3 sons needed an education in order to step up a little further in life, to have a generational jump, and moving forward. And so that was a big part of our lives, and that is why I'm sitting here today. I am married. My wife, Jean Meserve, was a correspondent for ABC News, and then 20 years she was an anchor correspondent on CNN. We have 2 adult children. Our daughter is a principal in an elementary school and working on her PhD in California. And our son is a world-renowned musician, and is actually on his way from the UK now, after a UK tour. And so that's who I am. That's my family, and I am the writer in the family.
Nice. So real quick, do you ever write any lyrics? Do you ever write any songs?
I
since you
never
have a
tried to
son who's
write
a
any
musician?
songs. No.
Oh, okay.
Not, I
All
never
right.
tried to write any songs. And my son actually is an historian and a musician. So what he does, he plays traditional American music. So he'll, banjo, fiddle, and what we think of as, West Virginia, country in the woods kind of music. But what we don't
Okay.
understand is that much of that music is derived from African American and Native American culture. And
Huh.
for instance, many people don't know that the banjo is an African instrument that was brought to this country by slaves and developed over the years. And so he has gone to the archives. He's gone to all these different places and found these songs that no one's heard of for generations, and he's brought them back. And he's on his recent album. Thank you, on his recent album and the one to come. This is the story he's telling. He's telling the story of African American and Native American participation in traditional American music.
Well, that is amazing. Can we know his name
Oh yeah, it's
so we can
Jake.
follow him too?
Yes, Jake Blount. Very simple and clean.
All right, Jake. Jake. I love it. I love it. Yeah, so I'm definitely going to go give him a follow and I'll
Okay.
buy some of his music. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so just a real quick this or that, because I kind of like to break the ice with this, but this is something I like to learn about people. It tells you a little bit about them, right? So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
ask maybe two this or that questions, and then we'll go into your story. So
Okay.
in the world, since you are a writer, this is probably something that matters to you. Are you a book person or an audible person?
Book person. I like to take my
Book.
time and invest in holding the book, feeling the book, and taking my time. I want to be in charge of the speed in which I read it and the speed in which I absorb it. And I also thank you. So I usually will always go for the book rather than Audible. And
Yeah, I love that.
I
I
sometimes
know I find myself whenever
go ahead.
it's okay, we have a little bit of a
Yeah.
delay. I find myself sometimes with this doing Audible and the book so that I have both. Like I can listen to it and I can take it in and then, but I
Yeah.
can go back and I can read and highlight what I want. So yeah, sometimes I do
Yeah.
both.
Yeah. Well, I think that
Okay, I'm sorry. This
it's so hard to find for me. It's so
it's
hard to find the voice that I have heard in my head all the time that I'm writing it, and I wonder if that's the same for many other authors. If what they're writing, the voice they hear when they're writing it, is actually the voice they can find to reproduce it. And some things I know I find it difficult when I'm listening to the book. I don't get the same depth of feeling that I do when I'm actually sitting and holding the book and taking my own time reading it. So I almost never listen to Audible, and my son will listen to it in the car. He travels a lot. I don't.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, well, that's cool. I'm not going to go into more about this or
Okay.
that because I really want to get into your story. And I want to hear, because there were some things, how your story, you said, we've talked, relates to the character Evan Walls. Now, I don't know how much of your story relates to that, but I'm curious to know maybe your background, how you grew up, how that impacted you, and how that shaped Evan in the book.
Well, I have been clear from day one, from the first book event I did, that Evan Walls is in part my story. As I'm trying to think of the author who said that no author is wholly separate from his life, his or her life. And I think it was Tolkien who said that. And so I'm definitely not separate from Evan. This is an experience that, the whole notion of an African American child who is academically inclined, who's caught between two worlds, one world the white world who doesn't believe he or she is qualified and won't take them as equals, won't accept them as equals, and then the black some of the black community that won't that sees this drive for education and intellectual curiosity as something that's color coded white, which means they're acting outside of their culture and acting outside of their community, and they become ostracized. So that did happen to me, and there were spaces within my community that I did not feel safe, and didn't feel appreciated. But the story I gave Evan was a lot more traumatic than my story because I do have amazing parents who, were there for me the whole time, as Evan's parents are not. And there are reasons why I created that for Evan and put him in the extreme situations that I didn't have. And in fact, my mother is like the actual genesis for this story. When I read an article about a black boy who lived in the projects and who loved to go to school, was a straight A student, and just loved the whole idea of learning, he got beat up by his own kids within his own community for doing something that they accused him of as acting white, meaning wanting to be educated. And his mother also felt the pressure from the community, and rather she was so afraid of losing her community, she did not want to support her son, and said that she wished he would just grow up to be a janitor or something and stop causing her so much trouble. So I told my mom this story, who known what I've been through, and she's the one who gave me the power and the reason, and she was the genesis for what would become this book. She was the one who said, it's time for you to tell this story. You've lived it. There are all these other kids who are living it and hiding in plain sight, and nobody's having the conversation. Nobody's helping these kids. It's up to you to write this story and bring it to light so we can have a conversation. So I credit my mom for doing that.
So does this still happen now, today?
Absolutely, it still happens now. There are any number of articles about people. Without going into depth, there was an article two articles in the Washington Post about one guy, college student, whose family had, was pressuring him not to speak well, not to become educated. He played the cello, which they thought was a weird thing to do. So they that his family was ostracized, and his mother even said in the Washington Post he was doing white stuff. And so there was an African American couple, two doctors, husband and wife, who had gone through the same thing. So they wrote to the reporter and said, "We want him to come to us, and we want him to we want to be his home base and support." I've recently been a mentor to two young men who are going through this right now in high school. As late as 2017, 2018, 2019, children were killing themselves because they were going through this. Mrs. Obama wrote about it in her memoir that she had gone through this, and the president has gone through. President Obama had gone through it, and Mrs. Obama spoke about it publicly at a historically black college, and saying, my husband and I often say we have to reject the idea that a black child with a book is trying to act white. We have to reject that. And so we have children taking their lives. We have children who are suffering all kinds of emotional and physical abuse. And we have educators and people who don't know how to deal with it or discuss it because it's been so taboo to talk about.
Yeah, and so here's a question on that, because we are now really, as a society, trying to grasp and become more awakened to what it has been like to be a Black person in this country. And we are all looking at it from the perspective of, eliminating this white privilege or the suppression, or, finding some equity between how this is run or how things are working. And I don't think anybody in my community, in the white community, is actually fully aware that there are systemic issues going on inside the Black community that need to be broken as well.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
that's the thing I learned from your book. That was the thing I learned from your book. I was like, wow, like I didn't even, that never crossed my mind that a kid would be ostracized or rejected by their own family for wanting an education because that's a white thing and not a black thing.
Well, if I can, this is an article called "The Hidden Hurdle," which was in 1992 in Time magazine. I just want to share a bit of this with you. Zakitha Blaylock knows that even dreaming of success can mean living a nightmare. She would, above all things, like to work hard, go to college, and become a doctor. But to many other black 14-year-old girls in her corner of Oakland, these ideas are anathema. The telephone rings in her family's modest apartment, and the anonymous voice murmurs daggers. "We're gonna kill you," the caller says. Zakitha knows the threat comes from a gang of black girls, one that specializes not in drugs or street fights, but in terrorizing black students. They think that just because you're smart, says the eighth grader, they can go around beating you up. And when you talk about these things that are existing and why they exist in our community and how we have come this far and we're still fighting these battles, when I was out on tour, many people would ask me, African Americans and white readers would say, how is it that these things are happening in the community and that you're still going through this internally as an African American community? And I would give my answer, and then I was rereading Toni Morrison, going from book to book, and I was in Song of Solomon, and I came across this in a conversation. This was given to her character Guitar Baines to explain why we're having these troubles. "Listen, baby, people do funny things, especially us. The cards are stacked against us, and just trying to stay in the game, stay alive and in the game, makes us do funny things. Things we can't help, things that make us hurt one another." So if you think about, let's just take a typical Hollywood show, and you got a family, and the father's an alcoholic, and he's abusive physically and mentally, and then you take that to the next generation. Say there's 3 kids. One child continues the problem with alcoholism. One child can't form a relationship because of the abuse between the father hands to the mother. Another child repeats his father's crimes. And then in the next generation, that continues if we don't deal with that. So now we go 400 years back to the beginning of slavery, and we bring all this forward through Jim Crow without any real attempts to deal with what's happening outside, the systemic racism that's coming from outside. So if we're a family like that family I just told you, we're going to have our own problems. And we haven't been able to deal with those either. Right. So all of that has come forward, and all of that rests in our lap. And when we talk about having these conversations, sometimes you can say, where do I start? Because there are so many fingers of trouble within the issue of race in the country.
Right. And so I'm just about finished. I saw a picture on your Instagram with Black Boy alongside your book. And so I said, okay, let me go get it. And so I'm just about finished that book as well. I got just a couple of chapters left in it. And there are things in that book as well that I'm looking at it and I'm reading it and I'm going, what? Like we don't even know how much we don't know. And to think about that this has to start within, but the fact is that it's so broken for so long. And that's why I wanted to talk about generational trauma, because it carries forward. It carries forward. You might have that one kid that stands up and says, I'm not doing it like this. Like I'm going completely polar opposite. But for the most part, it carries forward. And even in that one kid, the generational trauma is still there. It gets into a cellular level. I don't want to go into like science because I have a background
Right.
in a natural health world, but we have learned that on an epigenetic level, our cells hold on to memories.
Right.
You could have a dream about a plantation and a situation, and it is absolutely 100% your great grandmother that this occurred with. And so not only are you carrying it forward like that, but people I want to act like we're so far from it just because that happened 400 years ago and emancipation was in 1865 and Jim Crow ended in, I don't even remember the year, but what, in the 70s. And so, you know, we're talking, are you serious? I was born in 1968.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to just say, if this was still going on in my lifetime, then there is no way for people to be over it.
Oh, right.
You can't be over something that's not over. It's not over.
Right.
So where do you start?
Well,
you know,
one of the things I wanted to show in the book was a generational trauma. You're absolutely right. And while we have Evan working his way through and having the benefit of mentors to help him work his way through, there are other characters who do not have that mentorship. And you can see where the generational trauma for Evan is muted by his mentors who help him find his way. But the other kids don't have, like Taliaferro Pitts, who, when you read the book, you recognize is the antagonist who really is putting pressure on Evan, another kid. But all he can see is his father's trauma and the trauma that causes in him to then have such absolute 100% hatred of anything white. That is generation after generation. And you can only imagine that his father will do the same. And then you see all of these Black folks in the book who are trapped by their generational beliefs of themselves and their opportunities and what they're capable of doing. So you have the overall systemic racism that comes from the country. And we have spent, as African Americans, all of our time, most of our time, fighting that and trying to press that back. And in that process, we have taken our eyes off the ball in many cases of what was happening to ourselves, what we were internalizing and doing to ourselves. And then when we look at it, I think, Gianna, one of the reasons you don't know as a white person is because in the community, we try not to let you know, because if I say to you, or I'm just saying that, if I say to many white people that this problem exists, this acting white problem exists, and with regard to education in Black communities, then people are afraid that white people who are in power to make change will say, see, it wasn't white people, it wasn't systemic racism at all, ever. It was just these Black people who couldn't work together. And therefore, if you put that out there, you lose the ability to fight the overall thing, and you lose the ability to have overall help. And so this gets kept inside. But in the meantime, again, the kids are suffering, which is why I wrote the book and which is why I've been daring to have the discussion. But the generational trauma continues and continues. So when you're speaking of generational trauma, I want to read an email I got. I was on NPR right when the book came out and did an interview about the book. And then I got this email. Hi, Jeffrey. I listened to your interview this morning and I almost cried. I was a Black kid that grew up with my brother and mother on the main line in the suburbs of Philadelphia in the 50s and 60s. I'm 70 now, and the pain that you described does not go away. I have much work to do. I was on another radio show and they called in, and there was a guy who said, I played football in high school. I was a really good student. I was Evan Walls. I had all this kind of trouble. I went to Yale, and now my daughter, who I think he said was 6 or 7, was running into the same issue, and I don't know if I can handle it. So you're so right. The generational trauma is devastating. It builds and builds and builds. And what I think comes with trauma, or at least in my mind, we don't often think about, is whenever there is trauma, there is great loss. So if there's trauma because of a relationship you have with your father, like Evan has, that brutality with his father, the next generation is you don't know if you can have those kinds of relationships with men in your life, whether it's your brothers or your sons or whatever. There's a so you've lost that ability to care to be in those kinds of relationships. Every time there's trauma, there's a great loss that you carry with that into the next generation. And
Mm.
so I tried very hard in this book to show that, to see what we continually do to each other, to see what we as a country and a world do to each other. And my goal is to raise the conversation about this issue, but also to talk about racism. And as someone else said, no one comes out of this book clean. We all have something to look at ourselves about when they finish the Emancipation of Evan Wall.
Absolutely. And I think that for me, growing up with Black friends and thinking I had some of my very best friends were Black, and they hung out with us, and we went to the ballpark together, and they did things with us. Never did I realize what it was like for them outside of our little bubble.
Right.
We just did the things that we did. And honestly, these conversations, even with them, I didn't start having till recently, probably in the pandemic, when everybody's locked in and Black Lives Matter comes up. Then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, stop, pause for a second. So when we went places, we knew sometimes people would look at us a little sideways. I'm pretty tan. And when I was younger, I was even darker. And so people would look at us and my parents and be a little like, what's going on there? You got white kids, Black kids, what's happening? And we knew a little bit of that, but we didn't know that there was any issue. We just went about our business. We played together. We had fun together. And then later I'm asking them, so wait a minute. So when you weren't with us and you went places, you were treated differently when you went to those places? And they were like, oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, if you think people look at you sideways when we're with you, then it's even more when we're not with you. We have to worry. We're taught how to act when we go in places or, when you move about in society, because, you're always suspect for some reason because of the color of your skin. And to me, that was just, I don't know. I think it just blew my mind. I feel like I was a little bit naive about the situation. And it just, I was like, I know I can't understand this going on still, but I've seen it exactly happen with my brother-in-law. I've seen it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we all, to a certain extent, live in our own universe. And if you flip that, there would be many African Americans who wouldn't know what your life was about either, or what was going on in your life. So, I mean, I wouldn't, I don't necessarily find that to be an issue. You had friends, you were, you probably at that age and at that time weren't even equipped to have that conversation. So I'm not surprised that it didn't happen. But what would be worse is if you look at those pictures of Ruby Bridges going to school and Vivian Malone trying to go in and integrate these schools in the South, and you see all these angry white faces and screaming at them and yelling at them and pointing at them and threatening them. That's when you have the problem. I don't have a problem with people who are hanging out and having friends, even if they don't understand everything. What I do know is that those people feel like there's a friendship there, and if I'm hurt as a human being, you will recognize enough as a human being that you will help me. And sometimes that's all you can ask, because you can't, as a white person, walk in my shoes as much as you want to. I can't, as a man, walk in your shoes as much as I want to. I watch my wife deliver our two kids, and it's amazing to me, but I can never experience what she bringing children into the world like that, or carrying them. But I can be an asset to my wife, an ally to my wife, when she wants me to help stand beside her in issues of women's rights, which I do, and I listen to her and I take her guidance, and so that's what I think I'm asking with my book, Evan Walls, when I'm talking about the African American community to listen to me because I've been through this, and to the white community, listen to what racism has brought to us and how it has brought us to the place where we're hurting ourselves and we don't even know it and don't even understand it. It's just another thing we have to do. You don't have to live that. You have to know that it's there. And then you have to, at a moment when you are capable of making change, do something about it. That's where the rubber meets the road.
Right.
That's where I try to help my wife, and that's what I would say to you. And I have been saying this to educators all along the way. And I spoke to the National Association for Gifted Children, which was an amazing event with a couple of thousand professionals who I can say to, it's, now that you know, I think it was Maya Angelou that says, okay, you didn't know, but now that you know, you can do better. So now that you know, you can do better. You can
Right.
help those kids. So I don't expect anybody to live in the skin of anybody else. I just expect people to recognize that the people with the other color skins are human just like you and deserve your care and your love and your respect just like people who look like you.
Right. And the thing is, and this is something, yes, and this is something I've said when I've spoke on other platforms, and not about this topic. I come from domestic violence, and no, like
Yeah.
if you haven't been through that, you don't relate to
Right.
it. And yes, the trauma carries on with you, and how you're going to interact in the world, in the space with other people. Am I going to be able to have a relationship? Am I capable of all of? Okay. Yeah. So it does affect, and not everybody can understand it, but I am pro people.
Yes. Yes.
And we are all human beings. And essentially, thank you. Essentially, we all want the same things. There is more good in this world than is bad.
I agree.
We all want to be healthy. We want to be happy. We want to connect with one another and find common things and just be able to live your life to the fullest for the short time that we have here on this planet.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that even though that might look different for everyone, we all still want the same things fundamentally.
Yeah.
And a safe world for our kids. Now, let me just back up for a second, because you are in an interracial marriage, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And yes, and so you and your wife are able to talk this through, but you're also able to come together to show people how to do this, not just talk about it.
Right.
Like, you guys are a stellar example of what this looks like. So what would be, give me 3 things that we as white people can do, or people who may be dealing with what Evan Walls dealt with, where they're dealing with racism inside of their own community. What can we do to be a part of the solution?
Well, one of the things the first thing we need to do inside the community is to actually have the open conversation, which is what I'm trying to do. On the television show Blackish, they did a show about colorism, which is also kind of controversial in the Black community. And at the end, there was a voiceover, and it said, the reason why we did this, we knew it was going to be tough, but the reason why we did this is because nothing gets fixed in the shadows. And so we have to start to have that conversation. I think what you said before is you're a people person, and I'm trying to think of the part of the UN mission statement that every human being is born free and equal in dignity and rights. And if people can understand that and grasp that at a real human level, and to not think that just because I'm here and I can write a book and I can get published, that means I'm keeping somebody white from getting published. Or if my daughter, who went to Princeton, got to Princeton because she was taking the place of some white child. No, everybody can. We can. There's room for all of us to get educated. And let's just be happy for those children who got that. You have other spaces. Everybody has other spaces. there's this thing that people of color are taking something away from white people, and this is part of what you saw in Evan Walls too, with his education and people wanted to keep him in his place and think he doesn't deserve these things because he's black, but he's human, and we're human, and everybody deserves that same opportunity. So um, when I my thing is to try to get people to have a real what you're doing now, have a real serious not superficial comment, the kind of conversation you have when you're forced to go into work and have, someone to come and talk you through a seminar on race. I'm talking about people who want
The HR
right the
conversation,
HR conversation,
no.
which I've never seen helpful. But I was a part of a group called Dinners
Mm-mm.
Across Differences, where we brought in people from all. We had black people, white people, Asian people, Latino people, gay, straight, lesbian, liberal, black Republicans, super wealthy, average income. There were so many different people around this table, and it blew my mind after people. It took a little while, and then the conversation got real, very real. And I went home and
Mm-hmm.
I said to Jean,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the most important nights of my life. And we are still, that group of people is still in each other's lives because of the change we made in each other. So if we can just agree that we want each other to have the best life possible, then we all benefit because we all want to help each other go forward. And it just seems like it's so simple.
Yeah.
It seems like it's so simple, but why can't we do it?
So, one of the things you brought up is what we would consider a scarcity mindset. Where you would think that because someone took this position at Princeton, I lost out on my chance to be in that place at Princeton. That's a scarcity mindset and not an abundant mindset. And the truth of the matter is, this universe, this world that we live in, there's more than enough for anybody and
Yes.
everybody. There's more than enough to go around. You are capable of dreaming anything you want into existence. Look at the things that we have right now in front of us. If you don't believe that, with us sitting here on this phone,
Right.
you're in Washington, I
Yeah.
believe, and I'm in Texas right now, but I am from New Orleans, and we met on an app that only has about
Yeah.
5,000
Yeah.
people on it. But yet somehow I came across you. I found you on this app. I reached out to you. Who would have been connected like this? This wouldn't, but somebody dreamed this up, and
Right.
here it
Right.
is. And, so the truth of the matter is, and it's one of the things that I do when I'm coaching is, especially people who have been through trauma, and there's no way you escape life without getting
Yes.
some type of
Absolutely.
trauma in your life. You don't go through life without it. And when we talk about this, when I'm coaching, one of the very first things I do with people is, let's get to your dreams. What are your
Yeah.
dreams? Let's look at your life in these key areas. What are your dreams? People don't even know how to dream anymore. Now let's take it to a community that has been oppressed for 400
Right.
years. They don't know how to dream. I feel like I want to go into that community. I don't know if I'm the right person, but I want to go into that community and say, let's dream. I have a dream bug. We write the dreams on stickers, and you stick it on that car and you say, I'm gonna make this happen. Because you know why? The only limitations are your ones you put on yourself.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I
I don't
agree.
care,
Yeah.
again, pro people. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of person you are, pro people. We all have this ability, just like we have the ability to heal. We all have the power within us. We think we have to look to somebody else to empower us. But the truth of the matter is, we just have to claim our power.
And people
It's already
recognize that,
there.
and people recognize it when you claim your power, and that's where you get the help. When people see you doing that, and people reach out to help people. So I also want to make a point that when you, I think a lot of white people don't think that um, black people want their help. That they want white folks to try to see or them to even see where we might be hurting and reach out and help. I want to tell you that everybody should be helping everybody, no matter what. And there are black people in my life who have had major influence on me and changed my life, and there are white people, especially one man who was a mentor to me when I was in high school, and is still a mentor to me now. Um, and I would not be here, and I would not have had the life I had were it not for his love and support. Um, so we can all decide that yes, we have these differences of skin and gender and other things, but it all comes down to, as you said, people basic humanity and the idea that we are here to help each other and to help each other succeed. Which is also, if you when you read Evan Walls, if you've read it, and you know the characters who've done that, especially Eliza Blizzard, the character, the high school principal who reaches out to Evan and becomes his mentor, and change helps to change his life because she is the only person who's been where he wants to go, and so she can show him that.
And she opened up a whole world for him that he didn't know existed.
Right.
And she showed it to him, and it fueled that fire and kept him going. It was,
which is what the mentor did for me when I was growing up.
That's so cool. So, so you along this storyline. So I'm glad to hear, because I was kind of worried about this, that you had the family support.
Yes, I did.
And that they encouraged you. Because I was like, oh my gosh, I hope that really wasn't the story. But I didn't know that part of your life. But, so I'm glad to hear that. And then moving forward, this conversation, and not to give a whole lot away about the book, but it starts with you, holding, Evan as an adult holding a baby, and it's kind of just brought everything back from his childhood. Is that something that happened with you when you had your children?
When I had my daughter, I definitely thought about that because, we were in an interracial marriage, and it's enough to make it through the world as an African American, but then to add all of that on and put that on top of a child who is not asking for that and just brought into it, and you start to worry about, did you do the right thing, or how can you help her, and how can you, how do you work this out for her? So yeah, there was a different kind of fear for me than for Evan. Evan had so much trauma in his life that he almost came unglued in the idea that his daughter could suffer that even as an infant. He doesn't leave her in the hospital. He can't get out of the nursery away from her because he's so afraid in his thought process that the things that happen to him will happen to her, and how can I protect her? So I was nowhere near that bad, but absolutely I thought about the things that I carry forward inside of me, and where would that end up affecting my daughter, or But I can tell you that my daughter is like her mother, an extraordinarily strong woman, and I think you'd be hard pressed to make her feel bad about herself and where she's going.
Well, yeah. Confidence. That's great. It's a great quality to have, right? It's not the same as cocky, but confident. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Good for her. And the thing is, when I said, I don't know if I'm the right person, I really meant that more in a way is am I the person that would have the best impact? Look, I don't have a problem with being the right person to help lead this conversation. Or like I admire Mitch Landrieu for pulling down Confederate statues all over the place. Here's a mayor who came up. I mean, there was a lot of people who were mad about this. Yeah. And even I at first was just kind of like, what's the point? Why? It's history. Why are you, and then I started to say, let me, I got to look at this first before I start, just making some blanket judgment. And when you go in and you look at it, and the bases, the foundation of these statues literally had, white supremacist quotes and words on it. Like some of them actually said white supremacy, and we have them up in these venerable places. You know what? Take them down, stick them in a museum with a plaque, and say, learn from this.
Right.
We lost this war,
right,
and this is why we lost this war. And and it took a lot of bravery on his part and maneuvering on his part. But if you read his book and listened to his interview with Oprah, and you learn why he did this, because of the friends he grew up with,
right,
the neighborhoods he grew up with, learning how that affected them, walking to and from school together. And he's like, this isn't right. This isn't okay. There's no way we change and move forward if this stays up.
Yeah, I think people should read his speech. You can go online and read Mitch Landrieu's speech about taking down the statue. It is fantastic, and so much of what we're talking about he touches on. So I'm not even going to describe it. I would just suggest that people go and find his speech that he delivered. The text for it is online.
Yeah. And I mean, I ain't going to lie. I emailed a couple of places trying to get him to come on the show with us, but I couldn't get in touch
Why
with him.
not?
But I tried. I don't know why. Hey, I tried, though. I'm not going to lie. I tried.
You never know.
You know what? If he responds, I'll get you back, because I really feel like y'all should have a conversation. But anyway, but that being said, I really want to open up this to the audience. Anybody in the audience who has any questions, comments, anything that you would have to say about what you've heard tonight, because I do think that this is such an important conversation. So Amy jumped up here first. This happens to be my sister. So go ahead, Amy. What do you have to say here?
Hi, Amy.
To Mr. Blount?
Hey, how are you, Jeffrey?
Do you want to come on camera, Amy?
I can, but I don't know how.
Would you like to come on? Okay.
Sure. How do I do that?
I'll do it. I have to invite you. But I actually have to, I got to move my pictures around so I can find you. I need a producer.
That would be
invite
me.
to video. There you go. Oh, I can make you a producer actually on here. Well, all right. I invited you. All you have to do is accept. I don't know
if my lighting is good.
There you go. We see you.
That's good enough.
Yeah. I'm not as good at the lighting as her. I don't have my little circle light or whatever. But, we grew up in the same area, New Orleans East. And, I just thank you so much for coming, because this has been a conversation that needed to happen for so long. And I have had conversations with so many of our really well-meaning white people that have no idea that it's still here, that it doesn't, they think, no, that's old. That happened in my day, but it's not happening now. And I'm like, you just are in your own bubble, like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly right.
And so for me, and this is so shallow, but you'll understand where I'm coming from. When I dyed my hair blue, I have gone through many colors in this hair. I dyed my hair blue, and I would walk into places and people would be the up and down, like, and I thought, me and my brother-in-law, who is African-American, had a discussion. I said, I cannot imagine going into a place and being looked up and down like that with something I can't change.
There you go. That's beautifully.
I can shave my hair off. I can change the color 15 times. But you are judging me based on something I cannot change. That's not right. I don't care who you are, where you are, what you're doing. That's not right. And so
Or how did this become a basis of judgment to begin with?
It's all part of the construct of racism. Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
And it's something that people do not realize. And we grew up with many friends that look, I don't know, we might have been the minority in our area. It doesn't matter. When we drove down a street, nobody was locking their door.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I don't care who you are. If you've driven around with your best friends who are of another color when you're white, you have seen it.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it's such a subject that is untouched and needs to be spoken about more, because not nobody, a lot of people don't realize it's still happening. And so I guess my question is, because we talked about the monuments and all of that, and I agree that you don't put something on a pedestal that is bringing anybody down.
Right.
But I also don't want to go into a level of erasing history so people become ignorant so things can repeat.
Oh, absolutely.
What's
But
the
I think
answer there?
the answer is exactly what you're saying. I mean, we don't. There are no in Germany. There are no Nazi statues for a reason. But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
They study the
Mm-hmm.
Nazis in school. So history doesn't die if it's in their history books and you teach it. But you shouldn't force people to actually face it's in my mind. When I was a kid, it was violent to ask black kids to go to Robert E. Lee School every day, to look up and then
Right.
to go to a pep rally and cheer Robert E. Lee, and that, and to force black kids to do that is a kind of emotional violence.
It's
So you don't.
persecution. Yeah.
It is. So you don't need to do that. All of those things can be taught in history class, in a proper place or in a museum.
Yeah.
But we don't need to publicly um, assault people with people. I mean, first of all, these people were uh, they went to war against their own country.
Right.
Let's start
It's
with
so
that,
true. Yeah.
and then they went to war to keep people enslaved. And so, why should we be celebrating that anyway? We were just Deanna and I were just talking about people wanting to have the same thing, and having that kind of respect for humanity. Why do we want to put these people on a pedestal who don't have any of that? So let's set them
True.
aside as far as putting them on the pedestal. Let's teach about it in school. Let's teach about it in college. Let's have professors learn Southern history and all those kinds of things, so that it can be taught in the proper context, and not loom over anybody to make anybody feel less than.
Right. And I also 100% think
And you know what I love?
I'm sorry, Deanna. I also believe that a lot of the problem is that who is teaching in our schools is a
Yeah,
systemic problem. Okay.
true.
So what we're learning is not what's real all the time or
Right.
100% real. And so then we also have to reform how we're being taught so that you're being taught the truth of what's
Yes.
real,
Yes.
because they're putting out what they want you to learn. And so that is something else that needs to be reformed.
Absolutely. In Virginia, there was a textbook put out in the UC, and it's about slaves coming to this country. And you see this picture on a boat, and there is the white master in his best plantation dress outfit. And then there is, they say, a slave family meeting their new, well, I can't remember, they didn't use the word master, or whatever. And they're all dressed up in plantation regalia, and the kids are playing around and they're shaking his hand. That was in a school textbook of how this is how the slaves came to the country. And it wasn't until somebody brought it home and said, "Mom, look at this," that they were forced to change it. So you're absolutely right that we need to have people teaching the truth, but we also need to have, and it goes back to something Deanna said. Most people in this world are good, and don't want that kind of even if they don't want to talk about it every day, they don't want the negativity that goes with all that stuff. So one of the things we have to always recognize is not allowing the school to be the sole source of information. We as parents bring our kids
Mm,
in the world, and we owe them more than just sending them to school and talking about these issues.
mm,
We owe them an understanding of
yep.
life from our own experiences, from our parents' experiences. I used to tell people, when you shake my hand, you shake my great grandmother's hand, because in my handshake is all of the stuff she taught me, and that's where it should be with your kids. So when our kids went to school, they learned, and then when they brought those conversations home, we sat down, we brought out more books, and time we went online, and we brought to the conversation our what we had learned as well. And my wife being a journalist, taught our kids how to question, taught our kids how to figure out what doesn't sound right, and I need more information. So these are the kind of things we need to do at home, because we cannot rely on the school to be the complete education for our kids.
Right, and that critical thinking, it's really important.
Absolutely.
Amy, before you ask your next question, I want to let Ron talk real quick, just because he came up on stage, and I don't want to pass him up. I want to give him a chance to speak, but you can stay on here, and then we can continue the conversation. Ron, I invited you to camera, but of course you don't have to come. But on mic, tell us what you're thinking.
Yes, thank you, Deanna, for letting me speak. And Jeffrey, this was a great talk, and it was very illuminating, especially for someone like myself that's not only privileged in terms of being white, but also I'm male, cisgendered, and heterosexual. Yeah. So I have all of these advantages. Yeah. But my question is historical in nature. When Martin Luther King Jr. met with JFK in the White House,
yes,
JFK gave him the advice that maybe the African American community should embrace education similar to how the Jewish community embraces it. Do you think that was too simplistic of advice? Because I could be Jewish and you not know it.
Right. Well, I also think it was wrong, because if he knew Frederick Douglass, he would know that black people had been already embracing education since the turn of the century. I mean, in my book, I tell a true story of at Hampton Institute when the contraband of the black folks who were traveling behind the Union Army. Sister Peace was her name, and she basically said to all who want to learn, let's sit down right here, and we're going to begin a school and start to learn. All along the time that before we get to John F. Kennedy, there are black newspapers, there are black intellectuals. All of these things are happening. And before John F. Kennedy, there was Charles R. Drew, who created what we know of as the blood bank. And so you could get plasma anywhere. And today, his invention is in every ambulance and every hospital around the world. What he did continues to save people around the world. All of that happened before Kennedy. So Kennedy was wrong, first of all, in suggesting that black people needed to get better educated. It doesn't matter who you were supposed to emulate. What Kennedy should have said is that we should take the shackles off of people so that they can become better educated. We should give them equal schools, equal textbooks, equal access, and then they can continue to better the education that they're already doing. Before Kennedy said that, a black man named Thurgood Marshall argued in front of the Supreme Court for Brown versus Board of Education. He was educated. It wasn't something new. So Kennedy was just wrong. So that's my answer to that.
That's fantastic. You just blew that out of the water. Like I just never had a response. Like I've never had anybody answer it for me, because I always thought that it was very belittling, and it was just a flaw in his part. Because I know he's not bulletproof. I mean, but
right.
That was.
Well, nobody is. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for the question, because that's how we learn. And we cannot be afraid.
And really,
we cannot be afraid to ask the questions that spark the real conversations, Ron. So thank you.
And I mean, and to this point too, is that again, this comes back to, things being equitable, because this is the problem that we still have. We think equality. Oh, okay. So we don't have slaves anymore, but we're gonna give you your school, and we're gonna give them their school, and we're not gonna fund your school. We're just gonna you guys are going to just have to get by, but you have a public school. Don't say we didn't give you a public school.
That's
no,
right.
It's not the same. And let's also talk about, because of the oppression, you're behind a little bit. You need to be getting Equitable means you get the leg up so that you can get to the same place. Anyway.
Well, as James Brown once said, just open the door. I can get the rest. So we just need access, and Black people have proven all along that if you give us access, we can do equal work to anybody else.
Of course, because again, we're just people,
right.
people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, Amy, did you have something else you wanted to add? And hey, if anybody else is in the audience that would like to come up and ask a question, feel free. We're going to be wrapping up here in about 10 minutes.
Yes, the only thing that I was going to add is that as a people, we can become educated by anybody. I've always felt like the older I get, the more I realize how little I know, right? So when we were growing up, our grandfather was very racially driven. He would walk out the back when we would bring my best friend was Black, and we had no idea that he had a racial problem. But in later life, he realized those were the very people that were there for him.
Huh.
They came and checked in on him. They were friends of ours and my mom and dad. They checked in on him. They are the ones that a color isn't what is good. A person is what is good. So it could be any color. I could be a white person who's bad, or you could be a Black person who's good or bad. It doesn't matter what the color is. You can be good or bad in any color, but everybody can learn. And
Absolutely.
So this open conversation to me is so vital because we all need to learn. Even if we were in situations where we thought we knew, we don't know. And I've always told some of my people that can't understand is that you don't even know you have white privilege.
Yeah.
Like, how do you not know?
Yeah.
And I can't understand
by definition,
that's right. By definition.
I can't understand it. I can't understand them. But like I said, with the blue hair, that's a stupid analogy, but it puts it like, I can cut my hair. They can't change their skin. It's important to have the conversation open and everybody feel like they can get something out of it, because you don't know what you don't know. Sorry.
I agree. I will say one of the things from the book Evan Walls is that there are some, and I feel like I can say this even though I wrote it. I mean, there are some very, very touching conversations between Evan and his great grandmother. And I have had many white readers email me through my website. I've had people come to my book events after having read the book. And one of the things they want to say is, I learned so much, is like you said, that I didn't know. And the reason why I learned it is because I feel like this book let me in on conversations I never knew were happening. The conversations that you wrote between him and his great grandmother, between him and his mentor Bojack, I never heard Black people have those conversations, because you wouldn't you wouldn't. But I'm trying to show you honestly what happens in the Black community and how they speak about these issues in ways that you don't know. And I think that was incredibly enlightening for many white readers. And it was something that I was very happy to see occur from the book.
Yeah, and she is literally one of my favorite characters in that book. I have so many of her things highlighted, and I'm like, I am going to put together a list of quotes from Mama Jenny. I loved her. I loved her character. And I think part of it is because I'm a grandparent now.
Yeah.
And one of my things, I got 5 grandkids, and I want to make sure that I'm creating a legacy that they understand that they can grow from, right? And it's something that Jill mentioned in the comments here. She said, action starts with dialogue.
Right.
And that is one of the things you get with his relationship with his mentors. You definitely get that dialogue. even the dialogue on the porch where they had their meetings, you get some insight into what the community looked like and how it came to be that they would turn on their own quote unquote, right? Why they would turn out someone for just wanting to do better, you know? And so it's such an insightful book. I appreciated this book so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, okay. Anybody else have any questions? Raising of hands. You guys want to jump on stage? Because if not, we're going to let Mr. Jeffrey go. He did have a bit of a tragedy, and I don't want to keep you here longer than you have to be here. I want you to be able to get back to your family.
Thank you.
And I know you're in a process right now. I want you to know that my heart is with you, because I know, especially now knowing all the support you got.
Yeah.
I was really hoping that part of the book was not your story. Okay.
No, and I'll tell you one last thing before you go. A lot of people have asked me, why didn't you write a nonfiction book? Why didn't you write a memoir? And if it's really about what you went through. And I said, well, if I did a memoir, it would be Jeffrey's story. And people will say, okay, that happened to Jeffrey, and that's a one-off. But if I write a novel and people read it, most people probably will read it without knowing that it was my story. They'll wonder if this is a greater societal issue, and it's bigger than Jeffrey. And so that's why I wrote it the way I did. That's why it's not a memoir that is about just me, because I wanted it to be bigger than me.
And I love talking to you here tonight about that, because I didn't know how much of it, because you did it in a fiction format, I didn't know how much of it was your story or how much you added because of experience that happened around you. Or, you know, all of this stuff is coming from somewhere. We get that. But how much of it was yours and how much of it might have not been yours, but still things that happened.
Yeah.
And I think that just brought so much light to it. And it was one of the things I really wanted to dive into tonight. And I think we got it, clear, because I like the fact of how you just worked all of it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And I don't know. I just can't say enough about it. Anyway.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So is there any last thing that you would like to add, Jeffrey?
No, that was it.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. Amy, any last thoughts?
The only thing.
All right. Well, good. Then go ahead.
I was just going to say.
We never know how to say goodbye.
No, we don't. We're from New Orleans. But the only other thing that I was going to say, and it was because I have a really good friend of mine that when the Trayvon thing was going on, she didn't know what to say to her son who would go out in a hoodie. You don't know until you have somebody so close to you that you love so much. So just keep your ears open and just listen to what's not being said by the media or the news. Just listen to people, I guess. I don't know. Thank you so much for coming.
Right.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Okay. All right. So look, and what I like to do when I end my shows, and I believe this, I've had amazing guests on this show. I have been privileged. I am new to this arena, and I feel so honored to have you here. And I tell my guests this, and I mean it 100% from my heart, that I see you and that you are beautiful.
Thank you.
I just love people. I love people, So I just wanted to say that I appreciate and thank you for coming on the show. And we are going to wrap it up here, guys. You guys keep shining on, learn, listen, talk. And until next week, I'll be back.
Hey,
I'm going to bring up Waitbot here and torture you guys with some Waitbot music. Thank you so much again, Jeffrey.
Okay, my pleasure.
Let's see if I can pull us down from camera off here. Oof, it's always fun. Waitbot, there he is.